Good afternoon or good morning, depending on your time zone today. This is Doug Robinson from NASCIO. You have a poll in front of you that we'd like you to answer, and then we're going to have a second poll that will come up. And the webinar will begin in just a few minutes. We still have a number of people in the queue, a very large audience today, so we want to give everyone the opportunity to join us today. So again, take a chance to answer this poll, and then we'll be beginning a second poll up in just a moment, and we'll be beginning in the webinar in just a couple of minutes. Thank you, and stand by. Okay, I think we can go ahead and close this second poll on cybersecurity and go ahead and get started. Good day, everyone, and welcome to our 2019 technology forecast, what state and local officials can expect. This is our 10th year that we've broadcast this national webinar around technology at the state and local level, and I'm joined today, as always I am, by Dr. Alan Shark, Executive Director of PTI, the Public Technology Institute. Alan, welcome.
Thank you. A pleasure and fun.
So Alan is with us today from their offices in Washington, D.C. I'm actually on the road in beautiful Crescent City. I'm down in historic New Orleans, and we're going to be broadcasting from here. We have a lot to cover today. I will start covering the state of the states, and Alan will then look at local governments, and then we'll be ending in time to answer some questions. So I remind you, everyone is on mute because we have a very large audience today, several hundred folks that have joined us for the webcast. So you have a chat box on your right-hand side. And so please, if you have a message or you have a question, please go ahead and enter that into the chat box during the webcast comments, and we'll get to it at the end. So let me go ahead and proceed with our webinar today, and I'm going to go ahead and start with the State of the States, 2019 Trends and Perspective. I'm going to cover the state CIO top 10 and then provide some perspective on each one of those topics as we move forward. Each year, NASCIO provides a ballot to their state CIOs, and we go ahead and poll them during the latter part of the year. In this case, it was in November of 2018. We asked them to prognosticate, predict, guess what their strategic priorities are going to be for 2019, for the next year. We've been doing this now for 16 years. We have a lot of data around this, so it's very helpful. What I will tell you is we did see too many changes from 2018, but I'll highlight a few. The first four were identical, our 2018 ballot. What changed a little bit was positioning of some of the other topics, and particularly two topics off the list for 2019, which were shared services and agile and incremental development. They dropped down just below the threshold of our count, and two new topics came on the list that we've seen before: customer relationship management, and for the first time, identity and access management. And I'll talk a little bit later with some commentary why we've seen those appear on the list this year. But again, not surprisingly, the first four changed the same, and certainly even less of a surprise was that security and risk management, cybersecurity and risk reduction for the state was number one for the sixth consecutive year. So I'm going to spend a little bit of my time today really talking about cybersecurity and risk in the states and some of our data. I also have a second top 10, which you can get down. We can get that from our website, and that looks at the technologies and investments that CIOs are talking about. And again, it's going to be very well mapped back to their priorities. There's a couple of longitudinal information on there about legacy systems and ERP that we see each year, but effectively the top 10 for technology, again, mirror what you would expect from their strategic priorities. Certainly, as we sit here today in January 2019, the major topic, certainly with NASCIO and many other state associations of state officials, is the transitions taking place. We had 36 gubernatorial elections in November, resulting in 22 new governors. That usually results in a lot of new CIOs. In 2010, we had 36 elections, and we ended up with one new governors, and in 2011, NASCIO welcomed in 26 new CIOs. So we expected to see about the same percentage turnover as we've seen. What I will talk about is some surprising results that we've seen to date as of January the 17th. And you see the heat map here with the new CIOs that have been appointed for transitions in green. In 4 states where we had a party change, which is we had 7 states we had party changes. We've actually had 4 incumbent CIOs be reappointed. So again, that's something that of a surprise and really highly unusual from the data we have for many, many years of CIO transitions. And those states in Nevada, New Mexico, Kansas, and Wisconsin, incumbent CIOs were reappointed by the new governor of the opposite party. So again, something interesting to look at, and we'll continue to monitor that as we see some of the other states backfill their CIOs. We now have 11 new CIOs that are in place as of today. We expect, as now that all the round of inaugurations were completed yesterday, we expect to see more news coming up in the coming weeks about transition. So that's a major part of our efforts right now. I'm going to focus a little bit on data from our 2 national surveys and some of the leading and forward-looking questions that we asked about that for 2019. One which is important is, what about the top priorities of the CIO and goals? And certainly some of these are going to map back to our top 10, but in some cases we've seen some shifts in the last 5 years. 64% of our CIOs said that ensuring IT systems comply with security and regulatory requirements are very, very important. That's a top goal. But again, very compressed, not much of a difference between that and customer relationship management, which you saw was on the top 10 for the first time from our CIO perspective. And what had traditionally been number one was around value, what I'll call value creation, or the alignment from the IT strategy to overall state objectives, or in fact, maybe the policy positions, a policy agenda of the governors, or the objectives of the state agencies. And so again, that's something that we've seen in the number one position along with IT governance in the past. And so reflecting the concern around risk and around cybersecurity, we see again that the 2/3 of the state CIOs believe that their top goal is to ensure that IT systems remain secure and that data is protected. To that end, let's take a quick look at other data we have around what state CIOs and CISOs are saying around their greatest threats. So from our 2018 Deloitte NASCIO cybersecurity study, we have both 18 and 2016 data that compare and contrast their threats. And you can see ransomware and phishing remain the top cybersecurity threats for the states, and we've certainly seen evidence of that over the last year around major ransomware incidents in state and local government. So that's something we have to be concerned about. The bad guys have elevated the game. They're looking for new vectors and new pathways. It's not all about the theft of data anymore. It could be, in fact, around the disruption of the continuity of government, which we certainly see with ransomware, and we see with some of the cyber disruption activities that are taking place by the civil disobedience group. So again, we're going to see some changes there, as it may not always be around the theft of data or a data breach. It could be something different, like monetizing through ransomware, using a phishing attack to redirect state employees. And so we've seen a lot of that over the last year. So we expect that to continue to grow. What we have discovered, and looking at, again, longitudinal data for many years over these surveys with the same type of maturity model with the questions, is cybersecurity maturity in the states is certainly improving. The risk reduction efforts and the investments and the training and the communications that have taken place have made some headway. We were stalled for several years, but I think if you look at some of the metrics here about where states are in terms of their cybersecurity plan, their strategy, their framework, their training, I would point to cybersecurity training is required in all states. It's just not mandatory. So only more than half the states is still voluntary. So we still have a long way to go in terms of cybersecurity training for employees or contractors. But again, if you look at some of this, we've seen upticks in all of these measures over the years. So we definitely know that the risk-based strategies are being adopted at a broader scale. There's more investments. There's certainly larger organizations that are being developed within the state CIO community for their enterprise cybersecurity efforts. Expanded focus from operational or black ops or just the security operations center to one of more of a strategic focus, strategic intent. Again, looking at this as an enterprise capability and recognizing that resources need to be brought to bear on this. So that continues to be a major discussion, is effective resources to these threats to states. And so again, we're going to continue to monitor this. We will continue to do our biennial study, and we'll continue to look at additional progress. But we all know that there's a long way to go in the public sector in terms of being more mature in this space and reducing the risks. Again, a compare and contrast between different survey instruments, but very similar responses from our two major cohorts in 2018. And I should mention that both of these surveys received 50 state responses, so a remarkable response rate both for the state CIO and the security survey, which was completed by the state Chief Information Security Officer, the CISOs. So when you look at the common question around what are the major challenges or barriers to an effective cybersecurity program in a state, what we see, of course, is that very similar data points, but different response rates from the CIOs and the CISOs. The CISOs are much more concerned about their budget, although you can see it's a very tight cluster between the top three. We asked them in a forced choice to pick only three, and so you can see they're very concerned about all three. CIOs tend to be more concerned about increasing sophistication of threats. They're probably hearing that from their state CISOs on a regular basis. They're also hearing that they need more money. And so what we know from the data is that the funding at most state levels is not commensurate to the risk. States spend less than 2% of their IT budget on cybersecurity each year. We've seen a little bit of an uptick recently, but not enough to warrant any broad statements that the funding is adequate. It's still well below where it needs to be, and comparing it to other sectors and other areas of the economy that's what their spend around cybersecurity. So again, I think that's I think that what I would point out is the major crisis today continues to be around talent acquisition, retention around the cybersecurity space. We're still looking at negative unemployment, or certainly flat with cybersecurity. There are many, many more opportunities than there are candidates. States struggle today with attracting qualified cybersecurity professionals in the state government. The market is very hot. Demand is out there. The 94% of our CISOs said that compensation is the major barrier to attracting talent into the state government and executive branch. So we would certainly expect that. I don't see that changing dramatically. I think that talent crisis is going to continue, and states are looking for innovative ways to be able to bring that talent in, certainly relying on different programs and scholarship programs, networking. And so we're going to certainly continue to see more in that space. To wrap up cybersecurity, let me talk about our report and three bold plays that we articulated in that report, again, lined up with the data. One is one which I spoke to, which is to advocate for dedicated cybersecurity program funding. Very few states have any dedicated dollars. So that is certainly something that's necessary. One is to also include the state information security officer and the CISOs in the discussion around innovative applications and innovative public programs, what technologies are going to be brought to bear, making sure that they're brought into that and they can provide the expertise on their professional knowledges and they don't become a barrier to some of those developments. So that's very, very important. And I think finally, cybersecurity, effective cybersecurity is a team sport, and we need to collaborate across the board, certainly with other state agencies, other branches of government, but even more importantly with the private sector and higher education. And again, the private sector comes in terms of their solutions, in terms of their expertise, but also with the universities, working with them to come up with effective cybersecurity education programs, internship programs, collaborate with perhaps research opportunities with major universities that are looking at cybersecurity. So there's a number of things outlined in the report that we could do in this space. So that's something to take a look at. Both of these reports are freely available and downloadable from the NASCIO website. So let's shift gears and talk about one of our other top priorities that you saw in the top 10, and that's around consolidation, optimization, a lot of terms around here talking about the business models of how state IT and how CIOs deliver value and deliver services to their customer agencies across all the states. As you can see from this question, we've asked for a number of years. We've asked about how CIOs and their organization, their central IT organization, how do they plan to obtain and deliver those services over the next 3 years? I think for our solution and vendor community out there on the webinar today, you can certainly see that there's which I've highlighted here, a significant and continued push to more managed services, more outsourcing, again, internal IT service, shared services models, all expected to expand. The use of as a service models, cloud and SaaS combined to deliver value, subscription-based services that the states are going to use. All those are showing fairly substantial increases from the perspective of our state CIOs. What you don't see, which you would have seen 10 years ago, this is the inverse of what we would have seen 10 years ago, which is I'm going to build new data centers, I'm going to expand my data centers, and I'm going to hire more IT staff in state government. That's what you don't see. That's the opposite of what's taking place today. So, there's a number of causal factors of this, certainly capital, certainly funding, certainly the employment issue in terms of getting professionals into state government, just the challenge of managing an environment that state CIOs want to see as being modern has shown that they are going to be collaborating more with their private sector partners in the future. And that really kind of points to the evolving business model of CIO as a broker, that the CIO model for the last 4 decades was to be the owner-operator, and certainly it was in the agencies. We're going to see changes in that in the coming years, and we've reported on that, and we'll have more research out on that. So you look at the why, and not surprised to anyone, and we ask the why question, why are they moving to this model? What are driving the CIOs to move to this? Not surprising, it's cost effectiveness. Again, they don't have the capital to make those major investments and upgrades, and they're looking for the kind of pay-as-you-go solutions or solutions tied directly to their recurring budget opportunities, modern capabilities. Every CIO, public or private sector, wants to say that they have a modern organization with modern capabilities. So again, a variety of reasons, but those certainly that along with the quality of services are top of mind when you look at why state CIOs are looking at the changing business models and investing more with their private sector partners. So I think more opportunities to come in the near future, and certainly in 2019 around this. Let's talk a little bit about cloud. One of the topics that you saw in position number 2 on the CIO top 10 in 2019. So we have some data around cloud, and particularly on legacy modernization and migration to the cloud. And again, this is a case-by-case basis. Your mileage may vary depending on what state you're in and what opportunities you have, and what providers you have, and what business models you use, whether it's a single cloud provider, a host of providers, a managed services environment where you have many providers that are available to agencies. And so every state is looking at this and making their own decisions as to what fits for their particular opportunity and how they can procure it. But again, 41% indicated that yes, they have a cloud migration in place. Some of that's very selective. And again, you have 37% said no. So we would expect that to continue to grow. We've seen that growth from 20+% to doubling to 40. And again, we'll continue to see that as states begin to retire some of the major platforms and legacy environments that they have and move those to cloud opportunities. A related and I think very interesting data that we started tracking just in 2018 is the move of the mainframe as a service, or essentially moving to an off-premise mainframe provider. Again, that was certainly the stalwart of state government for many, many years, and would have been something that people would have commented on, that was the role of state IT and the state CIO, is to manage the mainframe or a mainframe environment or multiple mainframes. As you can see, very high interest. Already had a number of states, 18%, almost 10 states have already completed their move to an off-premise mainframe provider. And again, another opportunity for the solution providers and the service providers to look at where states are going in mainframe. Again, many of them need to abandon those platforms because of cost considerations. They don't have enough tenants there anymore. They have a number of agencies that have abandoned that. They're having issues with capital in upgrading their current mainframe platform. And again, they have application and operational support issues with retirements. And so I think you're going to continue to see this movement around looking at the mainframe as an opportunity to both save money and enhance the environment by moving it to a third-party managed service or even outsourcing it. And again, you see a large number of those states, almost a third are already considering it, and 20% plan it very soon. So we'll see movement even this year. In the digital government space, again, another one of our top 10 topics this year, and as well as 2018, we continue to look at the role of the state CIO as the kind of the enterprise lead for both the operational and the policy side. And you can see from the data that you have in front of you that that's the current role of most CIO organizations. We have some states that have created digital services organizations, almost half today, that are promoting that. They see great opportunities to improve the look and feel of the online experience, and that's what they're trying to do, is really improve the citizen experience, trying to integrate a number of applications across the board. They're looking for that single door into state government services. All this is very, very challenging because of a long legacy of silo-driven investments in the digital government space. So I think we're going to see more of that in terms of again, as you see, two-thirds having a multi-agency and a multi-governance model, which they can make those decisions around investments and looking at how they're going to share applications, share data, and most importantly, citizen data, and how they're going to use that citizen data once. And again, that's a challenge. So we see a number of states that have already articulated their vision in that space, and some that have already rolled out opportunities where you can have a login for multiple applications to improve that citizen experience, make it more seamless, make it more user-centric. And again, this is going to take some time to unravel that, and some state CIOs have been given more authority and responsibility in that space. A key part of that, as you saw, was around citizen access using some type of authentication or some type of identity proofing solution. So flipping back to our security study, you see here 33 states have established some type of enterprise identity and access management solution or plan to do so in the coming year. I think, again, you're going to continue to see that grow. For the first time, identity and access management appeared on the top 10 list in the number 10 position, and we see a number of states that are both looking at internal solutions with multi-factor authentication and trying to identification with their employees through the directory services, trying to tie up, again, multiple solutions into one enterprise. Clearly, they're going to look at cloud-based solutions because it makes more sense to them from a cost-effectiveness standpoint. And I think, and finally, I'll reiterate the citizen service component, because that is something that's an ideal target. And many states are looking to that, as how they can help citizens have that better experience by not having to manage multiple usernames, multiple passwords, and have one golden record that can be maintained by the state to give them access. So again, continue to look for more developments in digital government, and I think certainly Alan, from the local government standpoint, can have more to say about that. Just a quick comment about data analytics, because that continues to be on the top 10 list. This is a very significant challenge for the state CIOs because they're often not given the appropriate resources. They don't own the data. They're not the custodians of the data, but they want to have some type of enterprise approach to data management. And we see that is still maturing in the states, but just in terms of the data analytics side, this is a kind of resounding response when we asked about what the biggest opportunity is. And not surprising, you heard a lot about this over the last couple of years, is essentially, do you think or do you know comment. And I think for the states, they want to use the data to have data-driven policy, evidence-based policy. They want to have the data from a variety of sources, use big data tools if it makes sense to do that. So data analytics will, I think, continue to get more interest. We need better governance models. We need more resources in that space, and I think you're going to see states begin to do that. We now have a number of states that have appointed chief data officers, and again, we would think that's going to grow slowly over the next few years. And then finally, let me end with a discussion around emerging technologies and emerging IT. We look at these questions over time. We have this in our state CIO survey, so we've already asked this question in a poll, and I thought it was interesting to see the amazing coincidences here about the response rate. So we did ask the question again in our 2018 survey. What do they believe to be the most impactful emerging IT in the next 3 to 5 years? And what was interesting is in 2018, looking forward anyway, artificial intelligence and robotic process automation, AI and RPA, actually supplanted IoT, and by a fairly wide margin. So just in the last year, we've seen a fairly significant jump in interest in both AI and robotic process automation and use of bots, as well as actually applications and deployments. We have a number of states that have already deployed those services within various agencies or for their portal, but it was a big jump from 2018 with IoT. What I found fascinating was that in our poll, which several hundred people responded to at the front of this webinar, the numbers were identical in terms of the response of our participants today. 57% said that AI was going to be the most impactful, 27% on IoT, 8% on connected and autonomous and semi-autonomous vehicles. So kind of some amazing coincidence there. We had that lineup. I think as we look particularly at the opportunities from the NASCIO perspective and from the research team, clearly believe it's going to be in robotic process automation, kind of the low end of really AI, more augmented intelligence, the use of bots. I think the states are a long way from fully deploying true AI. There's going to be some augmented intelligence tools. There's going to be much more application of robotic process automation, particularly around standard business processes, which are routine. And we've heard that from our states. You can see here that almost a quarter of the states already have those in place. And we've heard from other state agencies where they're using RPA to take the routine and mundane manual processes and, again, move those to a level where they have bots that run those automatically at a very high level of quality. And again, they can do that 24/7. So we're going to see some continued operations. We do have some work and that you can look at and research on those topics that you can get from NASCIO. So let me end with some closing thoughts about the road ahead for 2019. And I want to start with certainly transitions. We have already had those transitions take place. We expect to see more here in the next coming weeks. We've already had some that have been in place, and we'll be talking to them, but we expect we've already had some surprises. I would continue to expect to see some additional surprises. Additional focus on cybersecurity at the enterprise level. We think that's going to be very, very important. And so also the development and evolution of the CIO as broker business model. So we're going to continue to see more of that. Look for one of our research briefs coming out here in the next couple of weeks, part 3 of our investigation into CIO. Multi-sourcing, we've already seen a number of states move to a multi-sourcing model, and I think we're going to continue to see that grow as we have more experience and the lessons are shared from those various states, and that can improve the operational posture of the state CIO organization. I talked about digital government and talked about AI and robotic process automation. Again, I think there's going to be a little bit slower in those space. But we've already seen states that have developed roadmaps and have made investments in that. And so once those, again, the benefits are realized and documented by some states, we're going to have wider adoption in that area. And finally, I would mention that the transition of the state IT organization that we've talked about for more than a decade. NASCIO's first work in this space was in 2005, where we put out research on consolidation and the transition to more enterprise class services and more consolidation and kind of a more hybrid approach with on-premise and cloud. All those are going to continue. We have a number of states that have unified their IT environment. I think that's going to continue because from a fiscal standpoint, it just makes sense. From a security standpoint, we note that those states that have moved in that direction certainly are more aware and have a wider perspective on reducing risks because they do have enterprise view. The visibility is very, very high. So with those ending comments, I just remind you that, again, this is NASCIO's 50th year. We're going to celebrate 2019, 50 years of an association representing the state IT executives. There's a lot going on in 2019 from our perspective, and here's a lineup, dashboard of many of the publications, reports and studies and data that I referenced that are all available to you from the NASCIO website. So with that, I'd like to introduce and turn this console over to Alan Sharp, Executive Director at PTI. And Alan, go ahead and take it away from your lush and lavish offices there in Washington, D.C.
Very plush and very lonely here in Washington. Imagine having a government shutdown and snow alerts and the whole bit. But Doug, we've been doing this for 10 years. And when you think about that, one of the cool things here is the fact the iPhone was 2 years old when we started doing this together, and there were 35,000 apps in 2009. So here we are. I'm going to take a slightly different approach, but I think you're going to see when this is over, we're happy to take questions, and that's usually the more popular part of all of this. Let me just start by saying that one of the things for 2019 that particularly excites me, and many of you have seen this, is that little red mark under our logo. And as we look ahead for 2019, PTI, it has a new home, and we are now part of CompTIA, and we're very proud of that. We've been working with them for a number of years, and the synergies are just incredible. Many people don't realize, aside from the fact that they are also a nonprofit, that they are the world leader as an independent leader in certification, technology certification. So we fit in very, very well, and stay tuned for all the different things that you'll be seeing with us towards that end. So let me advance and say that we have done a number of research projects ourselves. In the past, we're always outdone by NASCIO's graphics, so I thought this would be an opportunity to show some of what we do here at PTI. The difference is that, when you have 50 states, you have a more homogeneous sample from which to draw from. We have thousands of cities and counties where we try to contrast and compare, and one of the things that we have to do is look at information that we obtain from surveys, and some of the information I'm going to share with you today will be from surveys that are about just days old. We also do focus groups throughout the year, and we also do media scan. At the end of the year, I kind of tuck away somewhere and I look at all the different projections and all the different kinds of things that people are talking about and kind of distill that, compare it, contrast it with the information that we have and see how that compares and contrasts in terms of what we do. We throughout the year, do a number of studies, and we don't have any one place where they all wind up other than our website. So we invite you, anything you see here will be on our website, and this particular broadcast is being recorded. So for those of you who signed up, you will be able to see this and share with others among your team. So the things that we have dealt with this year is which emerging IT areas will have the most impact on local government in the next 3 to 5 years. We did one on analytics. How does the IT department support the needs of other departments and customers? We did one on the local government approach to delivering digital service, a big field. And this is really kind of like the next wave after e-government. And then we did one on smart city county strategy and the role of the information technology department. And finally, we did one on cybersecurity. To give you a look of what these things look like, pushed too fast, sorry. When we look at the whole idea of what will have the most impact, the Internet of Things ranked number 1 in our surveys. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, number 2. And I agree with Doug. This is often overhyped. but if we look at it in terms of augmented business processes, I like to think of it also as augmented decision making, that we have this equipment and this ability to kind of do things that people used to do, but do it much faster. Blockchain, and that's actually being applied now. And that, to me, has very, very strong practical applications. We're seeing that in records management and the like. Connected autonomous vehicles, that's probably something more for a local government that has to figure out how to be part of this revolution that's occurring. Unmanned systems, UAS, is big in crowd control, public safety. We've identified something like 23 different uses of these kind of things. And then augmented virtual reality. That's just to name a few of the highlights. Then we did analytics. How does the IT department support the needs of other departments and customers? It's interesting. 20% said they had no role. 36% said, yeah, we do analytics on behalf of our customers. 40% procure solutions. 42%, our approach is ad hoc. 56%, they just provide the tools. So you can see it's kind of a mixed bag based, I guess, on the needs and requirements of any local government, and they are so different by size and shape and even the politics. When we asked our folks about the current status of cybersecurity program and the environment in local government, 64% have developed security awareness training for workers and contractors. But when we asked the next question, how often is it applied? In what format? How do you have an ongoing program? That's when things start to get very, very hard to measure. And so all these charts, again, are available on our website. But clearly, we're seeing an uptick in not only cybersecurity awareness, but the acquisition of better tools to be able to develop response plans. We asked the question a couple of years ago, how many people have a breach response policy? A staggering amount of people said we don't have one, and a couple said, what does that look like? So we're starting to see that. One of the questions that you were asked at the beginning of this broadcast was about cyber insurance. And that's something that's on the uptick. But then when we ask the deeper questions, what does it cover? And who signed it? Have you seen it? We have a lot of people say, I think we have it, but I think somebody signed it at the purchasing level, or somebody did something and they never consulted us. What concerns us, and Doug and I were talking about this just yesterday, it's kind of like, what if you were a smoker, but on the medical forms you filled out that you're an absolute non-smoker and you're smoking 10 packs a day and you die of lung cancer? I mean, the insurance company does not have to pay if you were not forthright in your application. The insurance companies are getting really smart, and some of the forms to apply and receive coverage could be 5, 10, 15 pages long. And to make things more complicated, some of the auditing that goes on is now getting into cybersecurity. They want to make sure the records are safe. So stay tuned. As you will see in some coming slides, like NASCIO, this is still the number one concern consuming CIOs. Now, no discussion would be complete without the forecast in terms of how we see the spend in 2019. Our research partner, Deltek, works with us every year in coming up with a prognosis of where we are. The blue, which is prominent throughout this chart, basically looks at overall IT spend, IT staff travel, and staff development. And so for the most part, the blue is staying the same. So what I see here is more of the same as we did last year. The orange or yellow, however it's being shown on your screen, is an increase. And so that's healthy. But then you have the green, which is a decrease, but that's a minority. So in a sense, just standing still is not bad. Growing is even better. So the forecast from our point of view is very, very positive, given all that has gone on this past year. I'm often asked to look at our ins and outs of the year. I'll do this very quickly. This is from a scan of all the available literature in the last 6 months. Cybersecurity as a concern has become more of a crisis in thinking and in looking for solutions. The old way of perimeter-based security focus has been replaced with much more of a holistic, active monitoring and response systems approach, including now AI. Smart applications, I like to think of that moving and morphing into smart government. And that's big, including city and county smart governments. But smart government covers it all. Database transactions moving more towards a blockchain approach for security and building confidence in systems. Who would have thought, number 6, Uber, Lyft. Now suddenly the focus on bikes, scooters, on autonomous vehicles. Smart software being replaced by artificial intelligence, robotics, robots, bots, and it's interesting to see the growing penetration of customer service systems that are pretty much totally automated. So we may be talking to a chatbot, and once in a while chatbots know more than some of the people that I've been talking to. So an interesting shift, including smart speakers. Innovation, which is such a buzzword, has kind of evolved into change management, because innovation in its true sense is about doing things better and differently. And one of the missing pieces is always, how do we figure out how we manage that change among people? It's not the systems. And then number 9, virtual and augmented reality has kind of come together. Trying to define them as being two separate things is very difficult, and increasingly so. And now we're referring to it as mixed reality. And number 10 has a lot of implications. Hiring IT staff internal versus managing IT staff external. We are finding that local governments are having a harder and more difficult time in keeping and hiring new folks. Government is not the fun place to be, especially here in Washington right now. And getting that expertise, keeping that expertise in a very competitive and upmarket is really a challenge. So we see more and more local governments kind of sticking with their core, but at the same time looking at what they can outsource, whether it be through managed services or actually having certain services performed by others. So when I look at the priorities, this is our latest survey results, and this is just days old. And in the green, I'm comparing this to NASCIO's chart that Doug just presented. Security and risk management is a strong. Now, it's one thing to be number 1, 2, 3, but the strength of this one has been consistent for the last 6 years. Security and risk management, followed by budget, cost control, fiscal management. Interesting, for state CIOs, it was number 6. Number 3 on our list is customer relationship management. And that stands to reason because in this case, local governments are closer to the people. For NASCIO, it's number 7 and on the rise. Consolidation, optimization, this is due to budget pressures, was number 3, so that's kind of negligible, fairly close between the two. Number 5, enterprise IT. You know, local governments had all these little fiefdoms, and we still see a trend to try and figure out how to come up with enterprise-wide solutions. That's not how technology began in government, so it's understandable of why we're still dealing with that today. Identity and access management, we have a lot of people. Number 6 for local and number 10 for state. Number 7, broadband wireless connectivity, and was number 5 for NASCIO, fairly close. Cloud services, number 2 for NASCIO, but number 8. Of course, if we were to change that question in the way we ask it in terms of managed services, I think that number probably would come up much higher. It's kind of the word cloud. It kind of in some cases limits people's thinking in terms of how they might answer a question. Digital government, going beyond e-government, is number 9, number 4 for NASCIO, but I think we've had a head start on this one. Data management and analytics, number 8 for NASCIO and number 10 for local government. So I'll let you digest that. But then we looked at policy issues. Those were from the field. But when we asked folks in our various forums throughout this past year, looking ahead, when it comes to policies, they're concerned about net neutrality, disruptive technologies in general, autonomous vehicles in terms of understanding what they need to do by having infrastructure in place at the local level, procurement. We talk about it a lot. Some people say we're locked in, we're a hostage of the state. Some people are not sure, but there's certainly room to grow in this area. Privacy, continuing to figure out better ways to ensure and protect privacy as we know it. Surveillance, how do you have that balance? Those two kind of go hand in hand. Artificial intelligence, and there's other pieces to this, not just the augmented aspects of it, but the ethics of it. We have capital budgets versus operations budgets. This is this whole thing about, CapEx and how that changes things. I know people who are buying things because they still have a capital budget and they would rather expense it. Then we have IT modernization. If it works, don't replace it. You can only get by with that for so long. And then rural broadband. We cannot forget that. There are many people who do not have access to the very things that we enjoy in our cities and suburbs, and the growing interest in FirstNet in terms of where it's going, how people can participate, and what it means for local governments. if you want more information, I have to tell you that one of the best reads comes out every Wednesday, 50 times a year. Every Wednesday, Tech Matters. If you go to the PTI website, you can get yourself signed up for that. And then, of course, we have Tech Moments that come out and give you information that is in between all the Tech Matters. I always find 2 or 3 things in the Tech Matters that I find interesting. We have some very, very good editors. And let me remind you before we open it up for discussion that we still continue to offer our certified government CIO program, and we're now accepting vendors for our certified in technology leadership certification program with Rutgers. And our newest one is a certified digital service professional. These are 3 different certifications, and you can get more information on our website. And I think I went through this fairly quickly because I'd love to get the questions from our audience. So with that, Doug, are you going to handle the questions?
I am, sir. Let me jump back on here, and I'm going to pull that question pane up, and here we go. So first question, we've got several questions in the queue, so let's move things. Got a couple for me and a couple for you.
Okay.
And the first question has to do with cybersecurity and the role of the state CIO and CISO. In some states, CIOs and CISOs are leading cybersecurity initiatives that go beyond just protecting state-owned systems. Do many of these folks see it as part of their job to help improve cybersecurity for non-state government organizations, such as local governments or small businesses? We have seen that to some extent. I think we have a number of states that have taken what we call the whole of state cybersecurity posture, meaning that their plans actually include not just the executive branch of state government, but they've involved a number of other folks. They're working with their local governments. They're providing services. We've recognized some of these states, in fact, like Michigan, that has their CISO as a service that they provide to local governments that need chief information security officers, kind of a circuit riding opportunity. And we've seen other states reach out during these recent events and provide services, or at least an offer of assistance to local governments. At the local level, in terms of businesses, we've seen some states that have really expanded what I would call their messaging and education and awareness around cybersecurity. And that comes from the CIO organization. But quite frankly, I think the constraint of resources in this space really doesn't afford them to reach out and work so much with the private sector. So I think there's a attitude that they really need to protect state government executive branch first, because that's what is within their authority. So we're going to see probably more of that. Alan, the question for you had to do with data management. The question is around local government. Can you speak to the emerging trends and best practices that you are seeing in the area of data governance? Our jurisdiction recently appointed a chief data officer. Is that a role you're seeing more common? Off to you, Alan.
Yeah, thanks. That's an interesting question, and there's no one answer. Am I seeing it? Yes. Is it widespread? Let me put it another way. I think almost every local government has somebody with that responsibility. And then the question is, do we need to elevate that to a full-time position? And if so, who does that person report to? Now, the irony here is, and I think, Doug, you would agree with me, when you think of the word chief information officer, the word information and data are totally together. And suddenly we're talking about data as being something so different and somewhere else, and that the CIO, they must be working on the computers. They're the ones who keep the lights on. And so I'm troubled sometimes by how people classify the CIO, and then they come up with data like that's the greatest thing. Well, it is. That's information. So to me, are there data officers whose full-time job is to do that? Probably yes. And what they're doing is they're finding creative ways to extract data that may be in PDF form, some kind of machine form, microfiche form. I mean, when we think of data, some of it goes back many, many years before automation really took hold in the way we know it today. So when I talk to data officers, you have no idea how I've been able to take this data set and make it public. And then my thinking is, fantastic. What do you do with it now? Well, that's not my job. So, yes, there is a trend to mine what's there. And I'm most interested in it when we do that with the outcome towards making better decisions, more enlightened decisions that are more fact-based than just on what I think or what I feel. So, yes, there's a trend, but I am concerned about how that position reports, what their full goals are, and how they work within the organization.
Mm-hmm. I guess a related question, and you can probably provide perspective on this related question to me, because I think I made this comment about data and analytics, and I says, who says they are not the custodians of data? Better services will result from analyzing better data. Well, my comment was specifically about the role of the state CIO, and they are not the custodians of state data. They don't have that authority. The data rests with the agencies, and this has been an issue that has certainly been longstanding about the service portfolio role and the shared services role of CIOs. The data resides in the agencies. There's got to be a collaborative team-based approach because the CIOs, in fact, are not the custodians. Almost all the states, the chief data officer reports within the CIO organization. I think there will be a continued debate, as you mentioned, whether or not that's appropriate, whether it should be more at an enterprise level. Because, again, I think it was done for perhaps convenience, perhaps for funding sources, but I don't believe it's been done by design. It's been done more by default. For the recent ones, we've seen a switch. The most new chief data officer in Virginia, in fact, is going to report under the Department of Commerce, so that's secretary. So I think we'll see some shifts there, but again, legally, the CIO is not the custodian of the agency data. And so I think you're seeing the same thing in local governments. It's very challenging for them.
Yet we're supposed to protect it. So we're not the custodians, but we're the protectors of it.
Yeah. But it has been for the number of years on the top 10 of CIOs. They see the utility. They see the necessity of an enterprise approach with that, and would probably agree that they should be, assisting in that and providing the roadmap and looking at applications, looking at tools. I think what states are beginning to do is to harmonize their approach to analytics and also minimize the numbers of kinds of tools and approaches that they have. That would be real effective. And we've seen that, and again, have recognized states for their excellent work in that space. Question for you, Alan, back to the cloud question. Besides what was asked, is why is cloud that low? It seems they want to get the roof more faster and more cost effective. Cloud adjacent architecture being used lately. Is that a term or on-prem private cloud? Was wondering if either one was considering a term and seeing the selection of cloud platforms driven the cost or other attributes. So like that, so you raised that question about the way the question was raised to local governments.
Yeah, you came in a little bit garbled. It's just a sound there. But if I heard correctly, we're asking to kind of elaborate a little bit more about the cloud in terms of turning to that as a platform of choice. Did I hear that correctly, Doug?
Yeah, I think my audio was going in and out here. I think it was the terminology, which I have not heard, cloud adjacent architecture being used lately. Is this a term for on-prem private cloud? I think the majority of the states, their cloud approach has been, until more recently, on-prem private cloud. It's been private cloud provided by the CIO organization for agency customers and for perhaps even local governments. But I don't know. Again, cloud has been in the top 3 or 4 for the CIOs, I think, since 2010 on our top 10 list. So it's very high priority for them to move in that direction.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I guess in the future, will it matter where that premise is? I mean, I've seen it move back and forth. I look at the city and counties of San Diego where they outsourced everything, and now they've moved it back. But it's managed. I mean, it's their equipment. The government owns the equipment, but it's managed by an outside company. So we still see a lot of models evolving, and I think it has to do with the expertise, the knowledge of the people who are interacting with each other, both on the vendor side as well as the jurisdiction side, the level of sophistication. I think there's an inkling to have it on premise, but I'm seeing more folks at the local level who are very concerned, not as much about saving money, but they're having a hard time finding people. So I think cloud is still a growth business because of the manpower issue. If they can offload some of the things that they can, they will, and that may be the most compelling reason to do so, because it will be more secure than I know some local governments can hope. And so they're being realistic as they assess that. The question is, can they afford it? Because in many cases, cloud computing can be more expensive, not necessarily a money saver. And the other thing that, and I just have to acknowledge, if you have a brand new data center, this isn't the time to think about cloud computing. You have to know where you are in the life expectancy of your equipment, and there are a lot of elected folks who don't see that. So, oh, we should move everything to the cloud. And I've had people say this, wait, sir or ma'am, we have a brand new data center. It's not yet time. It doesn't make any sense. So there's some education to do on all sides.
Yeah. Well, I think those will be fundamental business questions that we're going to certainly see for state CIOs as they begin to make those decisions and become more hybrid organizations, where they weren't that way certainly 10 years ago. Question for me, Doug says he's surprised that some CIOs are being kept on by new governors. How does he expect this will affect state IT environments? Is the continuity of management beneficial? Well, I think certainly just at the continuity of management and leadership at that position is beneficial. We don't have a lot of data to support that because in the last 15 years, we've only had 3 CIOs go longer than 10 years. And so we may see that. We may see CIOs now that have served a full term or 7 or 8 years of one governor, and they may have more. But again, as I always tell my leadership, NASCIO saves a lot of money on longevity awards because it's very rare for us to give any out to our members. So this will be this next group of CIOs and the ones that have gotten to stay and may be there for an additional 4-year term or additional 8-year term, depending on the particular state. It'll be interesting us to monitor, but again, across the board, we don't have a lot of experience to demonstrate that. The ones that have been in those positions for a lengthy period of time will tell you that the additional period of time gives them the opportunity to overcome the forces of change and to really work at their optimization and unification plans for state IT. So we'll have to monitor that closely, but that'll be something to certainly look at with our group of CIOs that'll probably get to spend more time in their seat. Another question we have here is about the trend towards a chief experience officer. I mentioned certainly the trend in states to talk more about digital services and to do work around customer-centric development. We have states that are building personas. I'm not sure that one has talked about a chief experience officer, but I think there's certainly several states where there's individuals in those states that I know have those roles where they're looking at that from the standpoint of digital government at least, and moving digital transformation broadly. I'm not sure that you have seen that in local government, Alan.
No, but I agree with you. It's really, there is always somebody looking at it, hopefully, from a customer-centric approach. And I think that's where the focus is, from the citizen, from the user, whoever that may be. But that's clearly what's going on at the national level in the feds. And I think the federal and local government has been way ahead of this one because, again, they're closer to the people. And they hear from people a lot faster than most others.
Mm-hmm. Question for probably both of us. It would be ideal to separate private cloud and public cloud. Could you please separate public cloud versus private cloud in future surveys? These are very different. We actually have done that in past surveys where we've separated that. Again, what we saw was the predominant adoption and rollout of private cloud services, managed services, both within state government, also within the state CIO. The public cloud utilization is slowly growing. I think there was various concerns about security, about data, where data resides, which can be problematic for some states in terms of their current statutes. And so they were a little more hesitant on the public cloud space. But I think just in cloud in general, we have separated that in the past. And there's also the hybrid approach, too. We have a number of states where with the same area, they might use public cloud services for a portion of their email environment for certain employees, and then use a private cloud managed service for others, depending on the nature of their role in the organization. So it's something to look at. Alan, any comments from the local government side?
No, I see that as more of a marketing question. I mean, to me, I can see why people would want to know that information, and maybe we can do that. But the real key here is, what is the efficiency and how do we secure it? I mean, I remember, we're talking about doing this for 10 years. 15 years ago, it would be unheard of to have an accounting software running on the same system in the same government. I mean, you had to have separate servers for everything, and I think we progressed to the point of compartmentalization, virtualization, and encryption. So we will see. It's a worthy marketing question, but operationally, it's all about security.
All right, Alan, we have time for one last question. We're almost to the top of the hour, so I'm going to ask this question in terms of, we've talked about various roles on this webinar. The question here is on new roles. A recent report from NASCIO, I believe, indicated that 15 states now have chief risk officers. How quickly do you see this expanding? Are these positions reporting to the same centralized organizations as CIOs and CISOs or elsewhere in the executive branch? We do have one information security officer that has the title of chief risk officer. I don't know of others. We certainly have one that has that title, which is a very broad title. I would see the chief risk officer may in fact be more in the legal and under the general counsel in some states, depending on whether they have both. Some of them have actual physical security under their portfolio, as well as digital, as well as the data and the infrastructure side. Have you seen that in local governments at the title of chief risk officer?
I have not, but functionality, I agree with you. It's probably in the legal area, but there could be. I'm just not aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very good. Well, I want to certainly thank Alan, thank Dr. Shark again for his great comments and participation in our annual survey. We'll probably do this again next year, and as we have more data. And I most importantly want to thank the hundreds of attendees that we had today. Very large audience today, and I hope that all of you had a good experience and enjoyed the content interaction, and we're able to bring something valuable away from our comments today. So with that, again, I'll end this webcast for today, and please enjoy the rest of the day and rest of your week. Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.